Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Wine and Tea series. I'm Nancy Board, the co-founder and COO of Global Women for Wellbeing. And with me today is our guest, Katja Iversen, who's joining us from the New York area. Katja, welcome. It's great to have you here. And for those of you that don't know, Wine and Tea Wednesdays is a regular series we host at this time, and Shelley Chopra, my co-host, will be joining me shortly. But in the meantime, we just wanted to get started, and we have some questions for Katja. We're thrilled to have you here, Katja. We know that you are a global expert on gender equity, and we're really looking forward to hearing from you. So if you would just tell us a little bit more about who you are and tell us your story, that would be great.
Oh, yes. So my name is Katja. I'm Danish, direct, and I'm an advisor and author and advocate and activist and feminist, and kind of working to change the world for and with girls and women, so we all get better in a sustainable world where everybody can live their full potential.
That sounds awesome, Katja. And what got you interested in this area?
On my grandmother, I born in a family, and my grandmother was my role model and my yardstick. She was born extremely poor. She never had education, really. She could read and write and do a little basic math, but she was kind of sent early out to work so that her mother could get an education, and then she worked 7 days a week to get my granddad through an education, because they were both poor and they knew that one of them needed to get an education to break that cycle of poverty. So she taught me that we need to be able to control to live our lives and decide when to have children and not to have children, and that education is so important. So she taught me that Pippi Longstocking is somebody, we are strong, we can do good. If we are privileged as we are, then we need to be kind to others as well. So she taught me about the world, she taught me about the values, and that's the reason why I got into this. And traveling, of course, kind of seeing that coming from Denmark, I was born very privileged, and not everybody had the same opportunities, the same equality. Not that Denmark can't, there's not a single country in the world that has gender equality, but some of the Nordics are a little further along.
Yes.
But that was just not a given. And having grown up with the values, it was kind of, well, if we got it, we're gonna share it.
Oh, how wonderful. It sounds like she was a huge influence on your life.
Oh, she was. Yeah.
Yeah.
She saved me when I was born 5 weeks too early, and I was there when she died, and she asked me on her deathbed to go and change the world for girls and women.
Oh my goodness. Could you say that again for our audience, that this is what your grandmother said to you on her deathbed?
Yep. I was there the last weeks before she died, and we spoke through her life, and when it was time for her to go, she asked me to use my resources and education to go and change the world for girls and women.
Oh my gosh, that just touches my heart so deeply, that on her deathbed, this was still her mission.
It was
and
still,
and that you fulfill it, that you now take that charge and really work to make that happen. Wow.
I try and fail and get up again and do it.
Well, can you tell us a little bit more about how you do that, in terms of gender equity being, so you're so passionate about it, your grandma was passionate about it. How do you do that? What can you tell our audience about what it is that you do around gender equity?
Well, we got to get the evidence. We got to get that data, because we know it in our hearts, we see it in our lives. When I have been traveling across the globe, I see women who've been in the hardest of circumstances, in the challenging, kind of whether it's in violence or war, or I see them get up in the morning, get dressed, put on their best face and go and fight for a better tomorrow for themselves and not least their kids,
Yes.
just like grandma did.
Yes.
But we got to get that data that shows when we invest in girls and women, it pays on so many fronts. It's the right thing to do. It's the smart thing to do, and we need to do it. So it's kind of having the evidence on what's the situation, what's the problem, what can be done, what's the benefit of doing it, and then rally people around getting it done. And that's both in the political world that controls the political, but also in the money world that controls the big money streams. And it is at, community level, empowering women, making sure they run for office, making sure they get those positions, but also that they have the opportunity to control their lives, live it, and give on.
Oh, and Katja, everything that you've just said resonates so much. As you were talking, I was thinking of so many conversations that I've had with women on this platform about that very same issue. They may have been talking about, for instance, violence against women initiatives, but everything that you just said about how do we go about it, we have to have the political will within governments to make those changes, the financial ability to move forward. These were the same elements that were coming up. And as you said, more women running for political office that are able then to carry change forward. And as you said, the Nordic countries have had a much better track record of this than others. And so you seem like you have kind of a step ahead in some ways because you were raised this way. It sounds like it's so deeply ingrained in who you are, this whole area of equity for women.
I remember the first times I traveled, and also when I moved to the States, how surprised I was at some of the discussions, because I had taken some of it for granted. But that also just showed me how privileged I was. And we all need to realize that that's not given for everybody. So don't take that situation for granted. Be happy with it and fight for it. We can also see now with COVID how women's rights and women's opportunities and the gender equality at large is under siege, and we are seeing a rollback on women left even more at home. And they are on the health workers and the supermarket workers and the women on the front line, and they are bearing the brunt of this, but they are still not getting paid and equally and having the same opportunities. They're still considered second-rank citizen in many countries.
That they are,
Katja. But we can show with the data, but also with the power of the example, that it doesn't have to be like this. It's been gratifying over my career to work with the World Bank, to work with McKinsey, to work with some of the big money people, to showcase that it is not only the right thing from a human rights perspective, but it also is the smart thing. And then what we need to do is we need to rally a lot of people. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that this is a woman's issue, and it's not. It's a societal issue, and it might be man-made, but we need to be both men and women and everybody else to fix it. We can't also just look at it as a numbers game. We also need to look at it from that intersectional lens. Because women are not just women, and we need to look at ability, we need to look at ethnicity, race, we need to look at age, we need to look at religion, we need to look at sexuality, because that is also what's in the equity notion. It is not just a numbers game between men and women.
That's absolutely right, and so well said. Again, as I'm listening to you and I'm thinking of the conversations and all of the parallels that come together for those key elements. And you're right, this isn't a women's issue. This is a human rights issue. It's an issue that we need everybody at the table to be addressing. And
Yeah,
before,
and it's an economic issue, you know.
yeah,
I think one of those big studies that shows, you know, we could add 25% to global GDP if we had gender equality in the workplace.
absolutely.
And, you know, that companies that have more diversity in leadership, diversity of all kinds, but definitely also on the gender front, just fare better. And as I say to some journalists who want to talk to me about what's the evidence case for you know, kind of talk for kind of having more women in leadership, I kind of, why don't we start asking, why do they keep hiring men if all the evidence shows that it needs to be more diverse?
Right, right. And the fact that you say that and you continue to carry that message, some of these organizations are starting to change.
Yeah,
And it
we
is, I think aligned with men, aligned with our access. And as you said, the privilege, the access that others have to get into these corporations, to really make that pitch, to have them become advocates and allies with
yeah.
us, right? To really focus on why it's important from a business perspective to have better equity. Yeah,
And diversity and inclusion.
absolutely.
We need we
Absolutely.
need we need Black voices and indigenous
Right.
and people of color and all sexualities. You know, we need that bigger diversity and the inclusion equity part. That is
Absolutely.
super important in business, in politics, in everyday life.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes all of us, doesn't it? As I look at some of the other questions that keep coming up as I think about this, I wanted to just make the comment and get your take on this, and then I'll move on to another sort of direction. But just in the month of December, we read a report that said 140,000 jobs in the U.S. that were lost
Mhm.
to all women. So
Yeah,
140,000 jobs were women
yeah,
completely.
yeah.
So there's another piece of data that COVID, has really truly impacted the lives of women, at least even across just considering this country. Of course, we know it's happened all over the world.
And if I may add to that article,
Please,
not
please.
in the top line, but if you looked at the study, it also showed that 80% were women of color.
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
it was not
And
just,
it
yeah.
goes back to your position of where are the jobs being lost, what is happening. I've recently been picking up information about this becoming even a bigger crisis. So from your perspective, how critical do you see this aspect, that as women continue to lose jobs and lose opportunities, how far back does this set us?
The risk, if there's not an orchestrated effort,
Mm,
is that the pandemic at large will set us decades back.
mm,
And on the gender equality front, the
mhm.
risk is it can even be further.
Yeah.
Uh, so we need that really strong gender lens
Mm,
to all response and all recovery. And that's the economic and it's the social. Uh, and because, you know, when we look at it, the gender-based violence, the violence against
mhm.
women
Yeah.
is it's skyrocketing.
Right.
If we look at the unpaid care work, who takes care of the home, who cooks, who takes care of the homeschooling, for the people who are, you know, we don't like the lockdown, but we're still lucky we can do it. You know, if we
Right.
have a roof over our head and then we actually have a stable internet connection so we can homeschool and all of that, we're still the lucky ones. But
That's
it's
right.
kind of, who is it that falls on? It's the women. Who is it that are on that front line out in the hospitals? 70% of all healthcare workers are women.
Right.
In some countries up to
Right.
80%. So
Right.
they are both there, but they're also home, you know. So we can see a risk of decades of setback,
Mm,
but we can
mhm,
also, and that's one of the things
mm,
I was last year working with the UN on. We were in Women Deliver, where I was the former president CEO, great advocacy organization,
Hmm.
that really kind of emphasizes the evidence of great new data that just came out on on population, kind of how they look at gender equality, and good news there actually. But that's not, but kind of looking at how we can instill both in the stimulus packages, but also the political decisions that's going to be made in the response and recovery. So it's not without hope. Never waste a good crisis. We see
Yes.
some things are being
Yes.
changed. There's so many modalities that change, but let's also do that orchestrated effort to make sure that it doesn't harm women more than it's already doing.
You taking the crisis and acting upon it in a responsible way is key, is critical. We do have an opportunity now. And I appreciate you saying that. Let me ask you this though, Katja, what are some of the misconceptions about how to solve for gender equity?
I spoke a little bit about it before, that it's a woman's problem issue. No, it is everybody's business. Also that gender equality, gender equity is a soft issue, that it's a nice to and not a need to. And that is so not true. We can see that in the economic calculations. We can see that in the cohesion in society. We need women at the table. We need the gender equality in the workplace. We need it in the boardroom. We need it in the bedroom. We need it in the living room. Yeah. We need it in the kitchen. And it is a super political, but it is also very economic. It could be a tremendous catalyst. So gender equity, gender equality, it is not a soft issue. It is not a nice to, it is a need to. It's not something that, because sometimes, if you look at the budgets in a country, where's the big money? Well, it's in military, it's in infrastructure, it's in the planning. It is not in education. Or kind of both budget and prestige. Might not be so much in health. Different today with the pandemic, but we see big change there in investments. But it's but if you look at education, if you look at social, if you look at gender, it's really important also for the economics, but for society at large. We see, and some of the discussions I've had with world leaders is that when you get women in the political space, have kind of a gender equal cabinet, the discussion change, just as they change in peacekeeping and when you have the peace negotiations, because the discussion becomes about what society do we want, not just about how do we divide the power. And that also means it become longer term. So peace negotiations where there have been women at the table, the peace lasts longer.
Yes.
Because we don't just divide the power and say, you take east, I take west, you take north, and 10 minutes later I want the west, and I'll kind of go back to war. Very simplified. But kind of it becomes a more holistic discussion about what society do we want.
Yeah, that's a totally different conversation, isn't it? Simply by adding those voices, that diversity of voice, diversity of values, perhaps, and commitments. And as your grandmother said, why it's so important.
The lived experiences, they can be tremendously far from, I grew up in a rural village, and the capital felt, and the parliament, it was very far away. And it was as if, they didn't know our lives. And I can, kind of, we see it in the United States. We see a divide between, what type of people do you have in politics compared to what lives do most normal people live. We see it in gender equality. I know that I'm privileged, I'm white, I'm well educated, I come from a family, it was not rich, but we were not starving, and I had a roof over my head. I know how privileged I am, but that also means that my ears need to grow a lot larger to listen. And it's the same when you have those negotiations, and in politics, we need the different voices and lived experiences.
I couldn't agree more. Well said, Katja. sticking with this awareness of sort of the global perspective around gender equity, what are the cultural differences and maybe regional differences that you said? You touched on it with the Nordic countries in terms of privilege and advantage of being a little bit further ahead. What do you see maybe some of the differences are regionally and culturally around the globe?
Well, let's just say it again
Mm,
to all the people who haven't heard it. There's not a
yeah.
single country in the world where we have super gender equality or kind of gender equality across the board, equal pay, even if it says so in the law. So every country has a lot to do, on this. And luckily things are being done. But of course we need to look at also, where do you uphold human rights? Where do you uphold women's rights? Where can kind of, some of the studies show that there's still a lot of laws on the books that are inherently discriminating. Can women own land? Can they do they have their own social security number? Do they, and there's a lot of antiquated laws that needs to get off the books, and we need to put the progressive laws. And we can't point, to say, oh, that's this region or that region. The United States have, child marriage laws, so kind of they don't, child marriage in the United States in some states, so we all have a big job to do there, and then get the progressive laws. I worked with the G7 and President Macron in France, and the Gender Equality Advisory Council did a great catalog of progressive laws from around the world that touch on women's health, education, economic empowerment, participation, leadership, participation in society, violence. And so it's not as if, if anybody want a good idea and don't know what to do, there's the catalog you can pick it from. And we saw a big uptick in that. So get the old laws off, get the antiquated laws off the book, get the new ones in, but also make sure to invest to implement them. There's also laws on the books that are really pretty, but that have never been implemented. So it takes will, and it takes often money. So that needs to walk hand in hand, and that's across the globe.
And that's across the globe. Well said again. I mean, I'm feeling inspired and energized as I hear you talk. And again, I think of all the different women in our network that we have spoken with who are all coming together through GW4W. And I'm so grateful that you're part of us, Katja, and that we've had this opportunity to hear more from you today, because it takes all of us. Yes. It's a collective approach. And the more of us that are able to do this and have impact, the more we're going to get to your grandmother's goal of achieving this. But it takes all of us separately and collectively. And we believe that we're stronger together in doing that. So you've already mentioned a boatload of terrific concepts and ideas. So for people that are going to be listening to this, what do you think what can individual women like us, what can each woman do? What are some just practical steps, a couple of things that women that are listening can do to really take action in this direction of equity?
How long time do we have? All right.
We'll do this again. If we run out of time today, we'll do this again.
Never underestimate the influence you have. As in your home sphere. How do you bring up your kids? Is the girl pretty, beautiful, nice, cute, quiet? Is the boy fast, strong, kind of that? Never underestimate what you can do in your own sphere. How do you share the work at home? All of that. And that's not just for women, that's also for men.
That's right.
Kind of, what do you do at work? Do you lift other women up, or do you talk them down? Ooh, are we good at talking each other down? And maybe because we're used to being in a competitive situation. We've had so long time where There was no women in leadership, or if there was one, we would compete among each other to get it instead of collaborate to get 5.
Yes.
You know, watch how you talk about your sisters. And that also comes, watch your language and how you talk about minorities, you know. So we can all do a lot there. Then you have the workplace. How can you influence your power? The power of the question, never underestimate it. It's kind of, why are things like this? Why don't we try? And then that power of the evidence we started with, you know, bring that evidence and say, you know, here, you know, look at the photo of this leadership. That's not really diverse. And ask those questions. If you don't feel comfortable doing it yourself, team up with somebody else and get some good male allies to fight the fight with you. And then politically, of course, we need to support representatives who support equity and women's rights, all of them.
Oh, wow. There's so much.
And then we didn't even talk about the economy. You know,
I know.
Who do you buy from? You know, what do you buy?
Right. Right. How do
Yeah.
you make choices? So it's a very conscious effort, and you're putting those concepts out, which I love, for people that are listening to us to be able to think about and make a conscious choice every day about.
And then I'm also fully aware that not everybody has the time or the opportunity to go and fight this good fight. But if you have $5, or if you have, you know, a little bit of extra, support some of the organizations that do it. Yes. And there's so many good organizations, whether the reproductive health space, or it's the run for office space, or it's the, you know, kind of environment space, or, you know, kind of violence against women, you know, racial inequity. There's so many places where we can invest both time and money.
Absolutely. Absolutely, we can. And Katja, you know, what happens in these broadcasts, they run for 30 minutes and our time is coming to an end, as it always does, much too quickly. We will do this again. We'd love to bring you back, have more discussion, deeper discussion. It'll be wonderful when we can all be back together again and come together collectively and have really deep, rich conversations. I'm just so grateful that you took time to be with us today and bring your vast, you know, life lived experience, but your professional and worldly experience to this, and your passion. I think more than anything, I'm grateful to have your passion. Because the more of us that do this, the better world, the more sustainable world we're going to have. And
that was one of the things I learned from my grandmother. It's okay to complain about the situation, but it's not okay not to do anything about it.
Right. It's to take action.
Yeah. And you know, I can have that down days where I sit and kind of complain, but I also know that if I really want to see the change, we are that change.
We are that change. We have to be it. I think that's a beautiful note to end on. I'd like to raise my glass, my cup, for those of you that have a cup of tea or a glass of wine or whatever. Let's toast to your grandmother and to her mission of creating a more sustainable world for us all, and to be that change. So here's to your grandmother, Katja, and to all of us.
Here's to grandma.
And like we say at Global Women for Wellbeing on these days, great minds sip together.
We do.
Thank you so much for joining us, Katja. Look forward to seeing you again very soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.